Well, Joey Surace.
Yes, Christine, how are you?
Good. Now here we are right up in Sth Upper on top of a hill, and we're a bit closer to heaven up here, I think.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we get the rain first too, and a lot of fog.
Okay, now before we get started on you, I'm a bit interested in your dad's story, because he was born a long time ago. He was born a lot longer ago than my dad, and I thought he was born a long time ago.
Yes, Dad was born in 1905, and he came to Australia when he was 22, and that was 1927, I think, when he arrived in Australia, and he came to Carramburra. He had a friend or two in Carramburra, and he started his first job in Australia was working for the old Ross family here, which is just over the hill, and he went on from there. So it's a long time ago.
That piece you wrote for the Sth book, which is a great book, by the way, back to Sth, you said that the first place he stayed was in the pig sheds at the Carramburra Showgrounds.
He said the first couple of nights he had nowhere to go, and he slept in the pig pens when the pig sale yards were right up in the township. He slept in the pig pens for a few. I'm just not sure how many nights, but that's where he slept his first nights in Australia.
Yeah, fair dinkum, and then he got a job with the Rosses here.
The Rosses, and with that job there was a hut on the property, and him and his mate that got him the job out there. I don't recall how long it lasted, but it was for some time, and they lived in that hut, and their diet was potatoes and rabbits.
Fantastic. And would you like to live in one of those huts?
Well, not really. Not really. The old hut got a bit of a lean up now. The wind's got to it.
But there's a few of them around, and there's one opposite Joe Lentini's. You know who lived in that.
Yes, there was an old Italian there. There was a lot of Italians worked around here in the late 40s and 50s, and they were good workers. But a fella by the name of little fella by the name of Joe Salea, he lived in there, and he worked for different farmers around the area. They used to cut ferns and pick peas and do all those sort of jobs.
There's still some old strings for tying up bags in that shed opposite Joe's.
The strings they tied the spud bags up with, I suppose, yes.
Yes, now what about you? You would have cut your fair share of ferns, wouldn't you?
Oh yes, when I left school, I was about 16 and a half when I left school, and in them days all we did was milk our cows morning and night. And then the days my brother Tony and I, on this property here and the old property around at Sth where the school was, where we went to school, that's what you did. You cut ferns and sprayed thistles and ragwort. And of course the ferns, it was the only way you could get rid of them, but we couldn't cut them enough times. You had to cut them 8 or 10 times in a year to kill them.
And do you reckon that worked?
Well, if you could cut them enough times, you would kill them. But it wasn't until, some farmers might have killed them, but a lot in latter years when there was a new chemical come in called brush off, and I used it here on ferns, where Tony and I used to cut year in and year out. And when he left here and went away up in New South, he come back to visit me here one time, and he said to me, "How'd you get rid of the ferns?" And I said, "I sprayed them with Roundup," and I said, "I never cut another fern since."
You mean brush off?
Brush off, yes.
My dad loved brush off.
Yeah, it's a great chemical, but of course we never had it in the early days, and that's why we had to cut ferns.
Yes, and what your dad was digging out swordgrass, you reckon, his first job, that'd be a serious hard work.
Yeah, it was hard work. They used to dig them out with it was called a mattock, an adze, a big heavy thing like a hoe. And they'd have to dig them out by the roots, and they were hard, and they were sharp too. You couldn't get hold of them, they'd cut your hand.
You'd sleep well at night after a day doing that?
I suppose they did, yeah.
And then when your dad bought land and you cleared all the ferns, etc., and then he'd plough with the draft horses, and you'd grow peas and spuds?
That's right, and when he bought the first farm around at Sth there where the school is, there was 200 acres there that he bought in 1940 during the war, and the house was moved onto the property. I don't know where it come from, but I can recall my brother Jim saying that the house was moved onto the property, and Dad and Mum were the last people that operated the store. There was a store in Strzelecki down near the railway yard, and Dad and Mum were the last two that operated the store in Strzelecki. And then when the store closed, they moved up, they bought the farm, they moved up onto the farm, and of course, like you just said, they would burn 20 acres, 20 or 30 acres, plough it with the horses and grow peas for a couple of years, and then sow it down. Then they'd get the seed off the sides of the road, the cocksfoot, sow it down, and then he started to milk a few cows, and that's how he cleared his place.
What a good idea. It's a bit hard to imagine Strzelecki being such a hub.
I remember I don't remember the trains coming. They didn't run for very long, but I remember the yard there, and a lot of people used to go and just dig sand up out of the yard for doing concreting. Dad got a lot of sand from down there, and when he built the shed, the dairy up there on the place he bought, that's where the sand came from making the concrete.
That's a good idea.
Yes, but I was just going to say that I can remember him saying that butterfat in them days was only worth threepence a pound. Well, threepence is something like 3 cents today a pound. So they'd as I said, he cleared the country with the horses, grew peas in the summer and sold it. It was sent to Melbourne, and gradually worked up a herd of cows, and I think they milked 50 or 60 cows once they cleared the whole place. Yes.
Well, that was a fair-sized herd, wasn't it? Now.
Oh yes, every farm along this road here, as you'd probably know, they all milked 50 or 60 cows and reared a family in those days.
Yeah, I know. Well, you sort of farmed in order to live too, didn't you?
Yeah, but now you can drive between Corumburra and Warrigal and there'll only be half a dozen dairy farms.
That's it. Now, let's go back down the paddock. Have you had a few run-ins with those old gigantic tiger snakes down there?
Oh, yes. There was a lot of snakes in the area when they were clearing, and a lot of rabbits. But snakes here, no, there used to be a lot of snakes here years ago. When Tony and I were working here on this farm, where we are now, and, we're in the paddock every day, we'd get 25 or 30 snakes a year, and miss probably just as many.
Well, I hear that apparently snakes can live up to 50 years and they have about 40 young.
Yeah.
So
I do believe they breed pretty well. The conditions are right.
And on the subject of being attacked by things, what about bulls? Have you had some run-ins with them?
No, I've never been attacked by a bull. No, we've had different bulls in here. Oh, I had a young one here, was a bit flighty one time, but I got rid of him before he got me. That was the best way.
That's a good idea.
Yes.
Now, you played footy, and I think very fondly of the sites of the old footy grounds we've had round here in cow paddocks, eh?
Yeah, well, the first footy ground that was here was when we lived at Surace, around the road from here, where the Strzelecki school was, opposite us, and the place called Purcell's. There was a football ground in there, in between two hills, and for years they used to play footy there and leave the cars out on the road because there was no tracks in them days. And there was a hay shed in there on one side of the ridge, and that's where the boys got changed for the game. Anyway, for some reason or other, down the track a bit, they moved on to Mick Masterson's property. And that ground there, well, the wingers, the two wingers, could hardly see one another. The ground was sort of oval shaped like the top of a football. But no, it was the same thing. There was no made track in it, and in the wet weather people would have to leave their cars out. But I can recall a story about your father, Gordon, when he was playing. He used to play full back for Strez, and Mick Marston used to stack his hay. He used to cut hay on the footy ground. He used to stack it up the far end of the ground, and I can recall him playing there in the winter time in terribly cold, wet weather, and Gordon full back and the full forward for the opposition used to be sheltering behind the haystack because all the play was down the other end. Yeah.
As you would. Yeah, I remember him talking about playing footy there too, and one team would be on the uphill and have the wind against them, etc.
Right. Yeah. It went uphill towards the haystack, and the wind would always blow to the the change room ends down there, and they were only tiny little rooms in those days. But anyway, that's the way it was, and they played there for years. And then Hallora amalgamated with Strzelecki, and they moved down onto the flats down at Hallora. So we had a flat ground to play on in them days.
Well, country people
started playing.
Country people are very adaptable, aren't they?
Oh yes, yeah, they make do with things. That's all they had in them days, and you had to make do.
It's a bit blowy up here on your hill here, Joey.
Yeah,
and now back to the Rosses. They were famous for their bullock teams because they used to cart bullock teams instead of teams of draft horses. Do you remember their bullocks working?
I do remember the bullocks going past the Strzelecki school. Old Hugh Ross, the oldest fella in the Ross family, big family of boys and one girl, and he used to, I remember him going up to George Masters and up at Ferndale to pull some logs out of the bush. Anyway, he must have done that job, but I can recall him coming back along the main road there at lunchtime or evening or whenever it was, and he had a team of bullocks. They were good. Yeah, got wonderful family, the old Ross family.
And they'd cart a lot of the houses from around this area, and I reckon mine was carted by them.
Yes, I think so, and I think Jack Masterson's house was moved with Ross's bullocks too. Yeah, no, it was the only way they had to move any heavy things in the old days, apart from the horses.
And talking about Jack Masterson, your dad and mum lived in his shearing shed when they first got married.
That's right. As I said earlier, Dad come here and he was single and he met Mum. Mum was living up at Childers. I don't know how they met, but anyway, they were married fairly young, and Jack had a shearing shed down there, fairly good shearing shed, and I think that's where they lived. And Jim was born in that, down in the shearing shed. He was the oldest of the family of 8, 4 boys and 4 girls. So, yeah, there's a bit of history there.
Fantastic, that's great. And dogs, you're famous for training your dogs.
Yeah, I've been lucky. I've had good dogs, and the Ross family, they were great people with dogs because they worked in sheepdog trials and they had good dogs, and of course they had a lot of country there, a lot of cattle on the hill country, and that's the only way they could round their cattle up with dogs. And so I learnt a lot from them, and I broke my first dog in and worked him in the sheepdog trials, and had a few wins, and then I went on from there. I was very lucky. I had some good dogs and they bred well.
Well, farmers only have token dogs these days, don't they? My dad had a dog, you could let it go in the morning and it'd have the cows at the shed from wherever they were when he got there.
Yeah, some people had good dogs, because when you're dairying a dog, if you're using a dog to bring dairy cattle home, they learn quick because they're doing the same job morning and night. And but I see people today, they don't have dogs, they only got motorbikes.
Yeah, that's right, motorbike.
I couldn't farm here without dogs on this hill country, so...
The farm I work on, there's a couple of dogs, but I tell you what, they don't know one end of a cow from the other, and I'm the one that does all the barking. I've got to go into the gully before the dogs will. I've got to bark at to start the dogs off.
It's the old saying, isn't it? There's no good having a dog and barking as well. No, the dogs save you a lot of work. You can't put a value on a good dog in this country.
No, well, all hell's about to break loose, so I think we better get out of here while the going's good.